Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Talk Drift. For those that I haven't met yet, I'm Pablo, sort of an independent analyst. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Matteo Grandi from Neutron. He's the VP of Innovation at Neutron, and we will discuss private 5G, we will discuss life as a startup, and we'll discuss what is happening in the market. So, Matteo, welcome to the Talk Drift.
Hi, Pablo. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, as always, let's get to know a little bit better our guest. So how did you end up, working in a startup, and how did you end up working on private 5G?
Yeah, let's say that I'm a telco. So I'm a telco engineer from a background. I always try to be transversal. So not only, let's say, studying technically related topics, but I always try also to study more on innovation management, an MBA, Master in Business and Administration, and so on. But at the end, all the story that how I ended up in Neutron comes from the very beginning of my career, in which I was a researcher in a research center called I2CAT. And actually, Neutron is actually the part of Neutron is my thesis. So when I finished my thesis, then I worked on the project for other few years before leaving the research center, but the research center kept working on the project, and it was mainly 2016, 17, 18, and then 19 and 2020 they work on their own, and the 2021 the director of the area where I was working in that research center called me and told me, "Yeah, do you remember about your thesis?" I say, "Yes, of course." And now we want to make a product out of it, and they start explaining all what they did. And so I say, "Okay, let's jump on board. It looks like something really promising, something really exciting, and those such trains that comes only once in your life, you know."
Yeah, and it sounds pretty exciting, right? That you're writing a thesis and you're doing something, and then people are picking it up and say, actually, there is some leg into this, and let's get this into the real market. Let's get this into a product. So fascinating story. But I'm
Absolutely.
curious, right? Because you guys are a startup,
Yeah.
and I know that when you work in a startup, well, I know, I mean, people have told me more than I know. You need to be able to do a little bit of everything. You need to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. So how do you find life, working as a startup company in a new emerging market?
Yeah, absolutely. When you are in a startup, you have to wear different hats every day. But let's say that to give a bit of reality check, let's say that the startups is, let's say, a bit of sales and ecosystem, product, technology, all mixed together. So as any company, but in a startup, this is even pushed to the extreme because at the end you face with a new technology for technological startup, of course, building a new product, building your own ecosystem, and then trying to selling it in a market that mainly you do not know. You want to let's say build your own market. So the technology must work, of course, but you win or lose depending mainly on the partnership. So, for instance, we had a lot of partnership with system integrators, mobile network operators, and some of them worked, some of them didn't. At the very beginning, it was really tough, especially when you are struggling to find your direction. Because, as the name say, in Neutron, we started with the idea of going towards the neutral hosting, but very soon we realized that the market for neutral hosting was really tough. It has to involve tech operators, regulators, municipalities, all those entities that are in general quite low in reacting, very very bureaucratic. So we had to pivot at the very beginning towards the private network.
Mhm.
The private network market seems more promising, also pushed from what we saw in the United States, where thanks to the CBRS, the private network market was already taking off quite consistently. So we tried to replicate that in Europe, and we were probably the first or among the first startup doing that in Europe, and we did it our own way. So at the very beginning, we start juggling with a lot of proof of concept, custom integrations for different verticals. So of course, the main focus at the beginning was manufacturing, warehousing, logistic ports,
Hmm.
and then we have to start also pressing on make pressure on regulators, for the spectrum, especially because we are a company in South Europe, especially Spain, so where, let's say, regulators are not really into providing spectrum to whoever is asking for, because telco operators invested, I don't remember exactly how much, but was around 60 billion in
Mm.
purchasing spectrum. So it's not that the regulator now is going to give you spectrum for whoever is asking for, but it's an important resource when we are talking about cellular communication. So in general, startups in private 5G either can solve a vertical problem, either
Hmm.
can try to be more horizontal towards, let's say, the end user needs. But in any case, you have to, let's say, become modular, have a modular infrastructure of providers, partners to build your own ecosystem according to your market.
Hmm.
So this is like what has been for Neutron in the last basically 5 years.
Sounds like a very, very, challenging being able to juggle all different things, and again, while making sure that the technology, that the solution is working. And then the soft skills, I like what you said about telcos being slow, because it's something that I hear from a lot of people, and I know what my telco friends are not gonna particularly love that. But if everyone sort of is has the same perception, has the same view of, the telco world not being one of the fastest one to react, to embrace new things, well, eventually either you get the feedback on board and you try to address that, or as much as the spectrum, as you said, is a little bit of a covering blanket for them that protects
Yeah,
a certain world business, if you want. But
exactly.
then you need to really drive that innovation, which I see very few telcos trying to really change the way that they do things.
Yeah, I don't really feel to blame telcos in general, because if you see them, they are big companies, enormous companies. So they are stuck by their own weights, a lot of bureaucracy, internal bureaucracy, procedure that they have to follow. And when you're going to talk about changing or modifying their core business using their spectrum, which is their main resource, of course, thing for them gets really tough.
Yeah, and the spectrum conversation is getting better. But I believe in Spain, there is some access to spectrum right now. But what I heard is that is not the ideal spectrum for private networks. So that other bands would be better suited. That's what I heard from some people. But it's still like sort of first step is taken, right? You
Yeah,
got a couple of options, and then finding the best spectrum or whatever is available. We'll see how the market develops. But when I'm thinking, you decided to target the 5G, the private 5G market. Is that because it was a nascent opportunity and was, a good fit with what you guys wanted to do? And also, how have you seen the market developing? Because I'm curious on your perspective, particularly because, again, if you talk to a very large company, they may have a different view of how the market has developed, right? Because different priorities, different ambitions. So if you're looking on the other side of the ecosystem, right, we're not talking about the $130 billion companies, we're talking about a startup. Are you happy with what you've seen in the market, or is there something that still needs to really happen that hasn't happened yet?
mixed feelings in that sense, I would say. So finally, probably this was the first year in which I can say that private 5G finally grow.
Okay.
Finally, because it's from basically 2020, 2021 that we can hear that the expected growth of private 5G in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it will be whatever CAGR.
Yeah, never
But
trust
actually
the
was,
analysts.
yeah, but actually was not like that. And we believed at the very beginning that the industry, and especially the manufacturing, was the main driver of this growth, and actually was not like that, at least for the main geographies where Neutron is working, so Spain, Portugal, UK, and United States.
Mhm.
But so now, finally, the market, the private 5G market, gained some momentum. At the very beginning, we had to educate
Mhm.
the potential users, the potential customers. So when I say users and customers are two different things for us, because the Neutron business model is a B2B2B. So we sell
Mhm.
basically to system integrators, mobile network operators, since the main product is a platform that allows you to manage multiple private networks
Mhm.
independently from the vendor, independently from the technology. So we try to be as much agnostic as possible to the vendor and to the technology. We integrate different vendors from the radio access network, core network, edge computing perspective, and so on, also user equipment. And we provide a single pane of glass so that a system integrator or network operators can manage easily and automate easily different networks, different private networks, both private 5G networks and distributed antenna system networks.
Mhm.
So let's say there is a bit of mix in these technologies that are now converging. So what we saw at the beginning, that the market didn't even understand what private 5G was about. So who was more skilled know about 5G, the public 5G, which is
Mhm.
something completely different from the private one. So having first commercial deployments was basically a dream back on the day, on that time. So we ran a lot of proof of concept. We ran many European and Spanish innovation projects
Mhm.
that allows us to demonstrate also the power of private 5G, and which was possible to do. And but now finally we are having commercial deployments. So it's a couple of years that we are having real commercial deployments,
Mhm.
around probably 15 networks we have right now in Europe. They are real networks, real networks that are used for a specific purpose in the industry, in the logistic, in the with port authority, and so on. So now the drivers are different. So now the drivers is the control, robotics, latency, security. Also, security
Mhm.
is playing quite a role for this network, and in general, the possibility of managing those networks with a certain granularity. And then, of course, there is all the part of the business models. Also, business model is something quite different from what the market was used to. Of course, if you think that, to make the typical comparison, 5G versus Wi-Fi. So
Mhm.
the business models of the two worlds are completely different.
Yeah.
So either the operators leads the private networks, or there are some other vendors or system integrators managing the networks, or there is the possibility of shared infrastructure, neutral host, which is still a bit foggy in general, at least in Europe. But now we are moving from just a POC heavy period
Mhm.
to really we can see the an industrial scaling and project that they can scale in the industry, partnering more with vendors, with telco operators, system integrators, hyperscalers. Also, they are playing
Mhm.
a role in the stack, especially for cloud and edge convergence. So there is more maturity now in the market, but this has been quite tough at the beginning.
So there are a few things that I wanted to follow up from this. I should get like a pen or something to write things down, but I'm not that prepared, unfortunately. So we'll forget something. But the first thing that I just want to echo your sentiment. Yeah, the neutral host is still a little bit blurry to myself as well, in terms, because yes, you can reuse the same infrastructure, but then is the business model really aligned? Is there the incentive from a telco perspective to really have the network serving other people? And why would the enterprise really bother with that in most cases? But if you look at, Ericsson is probably the big name that is really pushing that idea of the private 5G and the neutral host, and they are very confident. Hopefully, they will provide me some clarity one day or the other. But the other thing that I wanted to ask is, Well, good that you guys are seeing momentum. When it comes to managing different sites and effectively what you guys are doing, it, if the few times that I hear talking about AI in private networks is sort of within this realm more than anything else. So I'm just curious from your perspective, is that really the first opportunity for AI in private networks, or is it a bit exaggerated, or is just trying to fit AI where it doesn't belong?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's say that AI is a buzzword, especially
Hmm.
now in this period. AI is really a buzzword. So of course there is interest in fitting AI in whichever thing. So because AI sell. So if I want to sell you the pen that you say that you don't have,
Yeah,
of course, if I tell you that this pen is powered with AI, it sounds way cooler, no?
yeah,
So
hundred
whatever now with
percent.
AI sounds better, sounds more futuristic, and also future proof. The reality is that we in Neutron at least we use AI for certain things, but it's really recently that we have a real AI agent in which you can interact and it helps you to configure the network. So it's like more an agent that you can telling this agent what you want to do, what you want to configure, so that you don't. If even if you are really agnostic to whatever happened in the network, you are not a
Mm,
technician or whatever, you are still able to, or even for the troubleshooting. For the troubleshooting perspective, it helps. But if you're gonna go really into the network, because this is more like managing the network, configuring and troubleshooting. If you really want to go into the network, like optimization, self-healing, I think that AI can play a big role. AI maybe is too broad. I see more like machine learning, graph
mhm.
neural network as most promising, let's say, approaches to optimization of resources. The question here is, does it really make sense? So it depends how big is your deployment, depends
Okay.
for what is your deployment. So it's very difficult to generalize. AI is a tool,
Hmm.
as a 5G is a tool, so Wi-Fi is a tool. I'm not advocating that 5G is better than or 4G is better than. There are some radios in the market that are sold as a 5G radio, but they are actually 4G plus radios, let's say. So their performance is really comparable with the 4G radios in general. So, but really depends on what you need. So what we try to provide to our customer is a bespoke solution, something
Hmm.
that really fits their need. We help the customer to the final user more than the customer. So who is gonna actually to use the network, to have the business case on the network, to discover which are the needs, discover which are the requirements, and then we build a network on top of that to solve that specific issue.
Hmm.
There have been some cases in which we mixed some technology. So, like there was a case in a very famous manufacturing industry. They need a lot of uplink, but they already have radio that cannot change the resource block allocation. So you cannot change the ratio between uplink and downlink.
Yeah.
They need more uplink. So in that case, for instance, we bonded the uplink of 5G with the uplink from Wi-Fi,
Hmm.
detecting which type of traffic has to go over 5G and which type of traffic has to go over Wi-Fi. So that was a matter of optimization of resources that you have, in that case for the uplink. And of course, if you're going to do things like a more intelligent way, you can act a deep packet inspection or an analysis of the pattern of the traffic and then take decision on how to direct the traffic over the different interfaces that you have available, both the 5G and the Wi-Fi interfaces, in order to balance the traffic according to your needs and optimize the network. There are other optimization, like in general, if you can recognize certain patterns on energy, on the energy consumption, so you can make optimization also there. In general, if I have to be completely honest, many of the deployment that we have are less than 10 radios. so not such super huge deployments. In that case, many time does not make a lot of sense to add AI,
Yeah.
especially in the network, in the RAM and the core network. Maybe it makes sense having something like on the edge computing, especially if you want to perform a more intelligent deployment of certain services, only when they are needed, let's say, more lean. So
Hmm.
in that case, it makes more sense. But it will come. It will come. And I guess that the recent investment of Nvidia into Nokia probably will go in that direction to really have AI into the run, especially.
So the couple of things are interesting. One is that when you said about, okay, we have like 10 radios in the network. Even when I look at the really big guys, and you can say that the average is still around that number. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. 'Cause it doesn't matter how big you are. Sort of with 10 radios, you serve a campus need pretty much, at least right now. Then of course, the more stuff you put, the more you can add and so on. The other thing that I wanted to quickly touch. So you mentioned you can sort of tweak the energy side of things. And I think that's quite interesting because very rarely in the private network worlds I hear people talking about any kind of energy savings or optimizing energy. I was just thought it was very very interesting that you mentioned that is something that potentially could be more important once sustainability becomes cool again, which right
Hmm.
now
Yeah.
is not that great again for now, but
Yeah.
we'll come back. And the other thing that sort of kind of a segue from what you were discussing. So you're talking a lot about partners that are working with you, and you're imagine you're building a solution with your partner to serve the enterprise. Is there any name that stands out? Any company or any type of company that you think, okay, these guys really helping the market to grow? Because again, trying to get some lessons that can be extrapolated for others.
Well, in general, let's say names. Now here I would like to thank a lot of partners, a lot of our partners, especially vendors and system integrators, which we used. But let's say maybe now one that really in the last 2 years played an important role for Neutron was Share Access. So it's a UK based company, and you can call them as a DAS provider or a tower company, but really they made something that is innovative. So they want to go beyond what the distributed antenna system can provide. They
Hmm.
wanted to go beyond what just a private network can provide. They want to mix the two technologies together in order to get the most from both of them. So from more a traditional, more a future approach. So they really had the courage to make the leap, and they invested and they trust Neutron to do that. So really, I think that companies like this are the ones that are pushing the market one step forward.
So is it fair to assume that if we go like a couple of years back, there was always the conversation, right? Wi-Fi versus private network, sort of one vs the other. From what you're saying on your part, and from what you said before about the example that you provided of bringing the uplink from private network and Wi-Fi, is it fair to expect that the future will really be built by whoever is able to get that convergence of different access technologies together working the best way possible, rather than having the single best of breed product for P5G or Wi-Fi? Is that sort of where you guys also see the market going?
Is what I believe. I think that there has to be a convergence. In general, not only 5G and Wi-Fi, but also satellites, communication, distributed antenna systems. In general, we are all these technologies are getting towards the same objective, to give connectivity. So at the end, doesn't make a lot of sense for, at least in my opinion, to start checking who is the best. Yeah, who is the best for what?
Hmm.
So maybe there is not a single best, and maybe the requirements will change over time. So better to have a system that can adapt to your requirements and can use different tools. No one will ever go to fix a car with just a hammer or with just a screwdriver, but you need a set of tools. So I think this is the differentiator that you can really place on the market, and this is like the direction that Neutron took. We believe in that has to be convergence between all the different technology, and not only from the radio access perspective, also from the backhauling perspective. Also, in that case, there are technologies that are nowadays used as let's say general backhaul. So I think about optical
Mhm.
fibers, but where optical fibers are not there, so maybe you can think about satellite communication or public public 5G or public 4G as a backhaul too. So it really depends on many different conditions, and it really depends on the requirements. The important things to me is being able to operate different technologies, integrate with different technology, and be able to get the most out of them.
And it's interesting because on yeah, I've seen that as well, and so you're mentioning satellites, which is something that I've also been working on in my with my other self as a proper analyst, and it's very exciting market. I probably have seen that a couple of days ago. Amazon renamed Kuiper Amazon Leo. Probably not overly inventive as a as a name, but clearly that does a big brand splash, right? It's Amazon, and it's clear what they're doing now with Leo. And I think particularly because there is a lot of private networks that are going to be in isolated area, getting that sort of Leo component will become important. But that brings me to the last segue of this conversation. Something that I often see is that private networks are like actually that I think more than I see. Private networks are a sovereign play,
I'm sorry.
uh, are a sovereign play. So are sort of the most critical and the most secure and the most everything within a confined environment, within adhering to certain regulations. Is that something that you is a statement that you agree or disagree on? Type of.
As said, private 5G is just another tool in your tool set.
Hmm.
So it's cool because actually it's a technology that is finally quite mature also in the market. Just don't look at the standard, because then the market is around a couple of years back from the release that you have in the standard. But for what we see, how in the last 2 3 years, also the product in the market um, improved, because at the very beginning there were two enormous gaps. So the spectrum accessibility
Hmm.
and the immaturity of the different device ecosystems. Now finally the device ecosystem is bridging this gap, is closing this gap. So it's still there is a gap, but it's shrinking. And you can really see that now we have devices that the vast majority of devices are able to work in standalone mode, which was not the case at the very beginning. So also smartphones, not only CPEs, are able to work in standalone mode. So there is still a lack of sensors, for instance, 5G native sensors.
Hmm.
I want to see what happened with the eSIMs, because many sensors they do not have embedded eSIMs. So there is still a certain path to walk,
Hmm.
but I would say that private 5G is quite flexible as a technology in its complexity, because of course it's more complex if you take in comparison with a legacy distributed antenna system, or
Hmm.
if you compare it with Wi-Fi. In its complexity, it hides a lot of potential. But I don't want to say that you can solve whichever things with private 5G, because it's not the case. There are certain things that uh, other other technologies might be better. So just to make a very very stupid example, if you have one single device connected to your let's say access point,
Hmm.
being it a 5G network or being it a Wi-Fi access point, Wi-Fi is much better in terms of performance, of pure performance. If you have a Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7, is way better than 5G. If you have one single device connected, so all the
Hmm.
network for this device, which is typically not the case, then Wi-Fi start to struggle when there are more and more devices connected
Hmm.
because they are going to compete for the same medium. So the famous CSMACA, carrier
Yeah.
sense and multiple access collision avoidance, they start to apply these protocols. So they start listening. They have to wait certain time. So it's all this waiting time before transmitting is basically suboptimal. While in 5G, since you have the core network that is deciding who has the priority. You have certain quality of service that you can apply. The scheduler that is gonna, let's say who is going to transmit, then is much more efficient when there are a lot of devices. Then what we saw is that in general, 5G is more resilient to clutter, and
Hmm.
I'm not talking about that the ISM spectrum is full of other Wi-Fi's and you're never alone there. But even let's say if you synthetically generate clutter, and if you want to jam a Wi-Fi or you want to jam a private 5G network, 5G is quite better of Wi-Fi in this sense, at least for what we measure.
Hmm.
But I saw the same results also recently that I was working in a project with the in the defense sector, and they try to jam different type of technology, and 5G behaves quite well. So it depends. Every technology has its own peculiarity and capabilities, and we have to be able to take advantage of all of them.
Interesting. And another time we're gonna be talking about defense, but probably not now. And I imagine a lot of it is gonna be under NDA. That's always the case with those guys are very secretive. But since we're running pretty much at the end of the time that we had for this, do you have any sort of expectation for next year, or like what do you think is gonna happen next year with the private 5G? I mean, you are quite positive. The market is growing, ecosystem of devices is moving, spectrum is getting there. So you know, glass half full type of guy for next year, and anything else that you think is gonna happen.
Yeah, I think that as you say, the spectrum is getting there. That's the one of the most important thing that are going to happen. The European Commission stated that there will be the upper part of the N77 band dedicated for private networks. So this is good, and many countries already start taking actions in order to have this part of the spectrum, let's say, dedicated for this type of use. Another thing that I would like to see is more on the business model. So we can mention neutral host, but neutral hosting is just one of the possible business model. At the end, is it has been defined in some countries like the JOTS in the UK, but not all the countries they are on the same page from this perspective. It would be nice to, because if we wait for the regulators and for the mobile network operators to agree on anything, probably we will never see it. So it has to be a bold move from the government, from the European Union, that say, okay, now we can apply this business model, and the operator has to agree on that. Of course, there has to be a return also for the operators. So, but this is also something that I would like to see a bit more regulation on the type of business model that you can apply. And this will open a lot of possibilities in the indoor coverage spectrum. So this is quite important. And then finally, the technical interplay and evolution. So the modern small cell and DAS system with private 5G coverage, all these solutions that are, let's say, replacing now the legacy distributed antenna systems that are more, let's say, um, multi multi-carrier coverage. Now we are going towards the multi-operator small cell and virtualizer RAN. So this is also something that I would like to see a bit more regulated on what is possible to be done and what has to be done in which way. So this is something that really should change in the next years. But already with the spectrum, probably we will see like a kickstart of the real deployments of private 5G. That will be, and of course, if the pricing especially
Yeah,
the
yeah.
radio access network will drop a bit because it's still too expensive in my opinion, that would be, which is also probably the reason why there are not a lot of big deployments. At the end, the deployment scale with the radio.
Yeah,
If is the radio access network the expensive part, then there is a natural limit to scale. So, but in general, if all these pieces of the puzzle are going to find their own spot, there will be really good chance to see finally the private 5G deployment really taking the market, which is also good for the future generation, the 6G. In
mhm,
general, if 5G uh, delayed on or missed its promise for years, then it's going to affect also the release of the 6G,
yeah.
and this is a pity. So it's important that the current generation of cellular technology can be really placed into the market and can really uptake the market in order then to leave space for the next generation.
Yeah, that's that's a valid point, and I'm one of the skeptics about 6G that need to find a guest to come on the show and correct my my view of why 6G at this point in time is really not needed. But yeah, thanks for sharing this. And yeah, regulations and the business model really needs to kind of step up. So Matteo, thank you very much for
Thanks to
your
you.
insights. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.